Welcome to Laptop Powerwall episode 36, Monitoring the Pack. So those of you who have seen my previous videos will probably know that I do quite like a nice good graph, a good chart, and what we're looking at here is a chart of the 7 groups of cells in my 2 kilowatt hour pack and looking at the voltage on each of those 7 groups over the course of 4.5 hours. A couple of days ago, the x-axis runs from the bottom is 3.47 volts up to 3.75 volts, which means it's only 0.3 of a volt spread. But what you can immediately see, the story that this chart tells, is that initially I had it running with a load of about 22 watts, which was a compact fluorescent light bulb running through my 1000 watt pure sine wave inverter, and you can see the voltage is starting to drift down. Then at this point here I turned that load off and the voltage jumped back up because it wasn't then dragged down by the load, and then I turned the load back on and let it run for quite a few hours, and then I switched the compact fluorescent load to a 200 watt incandescent light bulb, which actually happened to be 177 watts load running through the inverter, and you really get to see the batteries draining pretty fast. And there's some pretty strong story here about this group here, which happens to be group 2 in my pack, starting to fade pretty seriously, especially compared to the rest of the groups in the pack. And if we just move on a little bit more, just over 6 hours worth, and you can see the last few hours it was really starting to fade. This group 2 pack really starting to dive down to 3.2 volts before I chickened out and cancelled the test. And this is group 1 of my pack. So obviously group 2 and group 1 are way weaker than all the other groups in my 7 group pack. Clearly group 2 needs to be pulled out and either replaced or pulled apart and look for some really weak cells, and group 1 needs the same attention as well. So after running that test, I then ran another one that went from started at about midnight, I think, ran through the night, where I connected the group, my 2 kilowatt group, to my 1 kilowatt pack group, which meant it's got a slight upslope from my 1 kilowatt pack charging the 2 kilowatt pack. And then this is about 8 a.m. in the morning when the sun comes out and my solar system started to push some power back into the pack. And on this particular day it was mostly overcast. Then the clouds went away and we get some decent juice going into the pack, and then the clouds came back again. And what that shows me is that on a cloudy day like this I'm not getting a huge amount of juice put back into the battery pack, so it would make sense for me to add some more solar panels so that I can pump a bit more juice into the pack even on a midwinter overcast day. This I think was done on the 2nd of June, which in New Zealand is midwinter. Just a note about the x-axis. In this graph it's going from 3 volts up to 4 volts. So that's the thresholds of my charge controller. It will charge all the groups up to 4 volts per group, or 28 volts for the whole pack, and it will disconnect at 3 volts per group, 21 volts for the pack. So that is the spread of what I've got to work with in my current setup. I'm choosing not to charge above 4 volts in order to extend the life of the battery pack. And this is live right now, looking at what the pack is doing. It's been running like this for 4.5 hours, and it's just after 10 o'clock at night, so it's been running since about 6 o'clock here. This is 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock. And there's no power going into the pack, and I don't have any major load on. I was charging my electric bike, but the battery pack on that is mostly full, so it's not really doing much, and it's slowly drifting down very little over the course of the last 4.5 hours. So I'll just show you what happens when I turn a 150 watt light bulb on. My watt meter tells me that is 133, 131 watts coming out of the inverter. It's a reasonable drain, and already off in the corner here you can start to see the batteries, the cells drooping, which is what you'd expect, and drooping a little bit. For this pack, it's only, we're talking 3 kilowatts for the whole pack, which is quite small. 130 watts is a reasonable strain on it. A couple of weeks ago I tested running my fridge, which is about the same kind of current drain, and it was quite happily running for 3 or 4 days in overcast weather. But by the end of that 3 or 4 days the battery was down around 3 volts. So I really do need to get a bit more, probably twice as much solar panel. At the moment I've got 420 watts of PV panels on the roof, and if I doubled that I would probably be able to get a lot more juice back into the batteries each day. So you can just see it slowly ticking along in the corner there. So that's pretty clearly, you can see it starting to, from the point where I turned it on, you can see those packs are starting to droop. You can see the blue group 2 is already struggling, and group 1 is already struggling. And there's another green one which is okay. So coming into this period where I turned it on, there's 3 packs that were a bit under all the rest, but as soon as we put a load in, it's groups 2 and 1 that are really suffering. So that tells me that the green pack was a bit undercharged, but as the health of the actual cells in that pack are pretty good, because they're not drooping in the same way that this does under load. I'll show you how this is all wired up and the software that I'm using. So what we're looking at here is the software I'm using to chart these graphs to monitor the pack, and it's called LogView. It's donationware created by some German guy, running on an ancient old XP laptop that I've just resuscitated. And this version is version 2, which is not the latest version. The latest version runs on Windows 7 and Windows 10, and also I think there's a Linux version 2. This is the version that will run on Windows XP. The data that's coming in, it's shown down the bottom here, is coming from my iCharger. It has a USB port which goes down and into the laptop, and that is connected via the balance leads to all the groups in the pack, and it also is connected to the BMS, which is still running. And that's it. That is all that it is needed for this LogView software to operate. The nice thing about it is it's got preset information on pretty much any RC charger that you can think of, including the iMax B6 and a whole bunch of more modern chargers than that, more expensive chargers. So the software already knows about those. You just tell it that I told it I'm running an iCharger 1010 V+, and that's all you need to do. And it will do all sorts of nice things, like it will give you the raw data, it will give you an analog view of what's going on with the pack. But the main thing is it does very nice graphs, and it gives you the raw data which you can export to Excel. So the main benefit of this software is it lets you see very quickly what's going on with the different groups of cells that you've got in your pack. You can see how quickly they're fading with different kinds of loads. It's very easy to tell where you've got a particular group is not coping, and then you can do something about it. One other thing that I should mention about this software is it will, depending on which charger you tell it you're using, it will already know what elements that your particular charger is outputting on its USB port. The iCharger outputs the input voltage, main pack voltage, the current. It can show you capacity, it can show you power and energy, it can show you up to 10 cells, their independent voltages, and the internal temperature of the iCharger and external temperature if you get an external temperature probe for your iCharger. You can stick that into your battery and measure it through the LogView system, which is also quite nice. So there's plenty of scope for monitoring different aspects of the battery pack using this software. I hope that has been interesting for you. Thanks for watching, and catch you next time. Cheers.